Hey, what's up everyone? This is Phil Ebner with videoschoolonline.com bringing you a quick tutorial. This is an After Effects basic motion graphics tutorial. We're going to teach you how to do some basic motion graphics in hopefully less than 10 minutes. We'll see how quickly we can get through all of this. But we're basically going to go through some position, size, and different types of transitions to create something like this. So motion graphics, and especially motion graphics with text, it's a huge thing right now. You see it in commercials and movies and TV shows, music videos, you name it. There's some motion graphics going on. And so it really boils down through a few basic techniques that I'm going to show you how to use in After Effects. Now, before we get started, I would just want to say that you can be using whatever version of After Effects that you want. I am going to be using After Effects CC, which is the Creative Cloud version, the latest version as of the recording of this lesson. But you could really use any of them. And while watching this video, make sure you're watching in 1920 1080p full screen. You'll get the best viewing experience that way. So I'm also going to go through a little bit quicker, so it may be good if you have a little bit of After Effects experience and just know your way around the program. If you don't, you can go and check out my other tutorials or even one of my online classes. I have a complete After Effects course where you'll learn everything you need to know. So here we are in After Effects, and this is the basic motion graphic that we're going to create today. So to create a new composition or a new video, you go down to this button down here that's Create New Composition, or go up to the top, select New Composition, or press Command N on a Mac, or Control N on a PC. You can just name this Motion Graphics or whatever you want. This is where you set your settings in this module. So we have 1920 by 1080, frame rate 23976, that's fine. Duration 10 seconds, that's good enough for us. Background color I always leave at black. But you'll notice when I created that, the background is not black, and that's because my toggle transparency grid is clicked on, and so that means I can see what's transparent, because technically there is no background. Even though they say it's black, there's no layer here that is creating a black background. So we're going to create a new layer. You can go up to Layer, New, Solid. That's what we're going to create. There's all sorts of different layers. So there's text, solid, lights, cameras, all sorts of things. We're going to create a new solid. So you can also press Command Y on the keyboard. And then just pick a color. I used this aqua teal for the last version, so I'll use something else. Maybe something like a little bit of purple in there, something like this. Magenta, that's nice. And I'm going to rename this background. We can always go back and change the color of this if it's too bright or something like that. You can press Command-Shift-Y on a Mac, or you can go up to Layer, Solid Settings, and you can click this color and basically change it. Say I want more gray in there, something like that. You can do that. Alright, so then we're going to start to add our text. So you go up to this T or press Command-T, and then click in your composition and then type your first word. And I already have, my font choice and everything, but we can choose a different font for just for sake of trying something new. Over here in your character window, if you don't see that, you go up to Window and click on Character. I love Avenir, it's a nice clean font. We'll try to use something else that's kind of clean like that. How about Futura is not bad, and there's also different options down here. So we can do condensed medium, medium italics, condensed extra bold. We'll do that condensed medium. I kind of like that. And we want to center this as much as possible. We can go down here to select and turn on title action safe. And this gives us this grid kind of, and we can see this T or this plus sign is in the middle of the composition. And I'm just going to put this at the top for now and leave it there, and then I'm going to raise it up just a bit. And if I click and hold shift down, you'll notice that as I raise up, it stays along that y-axis. It doesn't let me go left or right. I already moved it to the center this way on the x-axis, but now I want to just raise it up. So by holding shift, it keeps me on that y-axis, and that really helps me, keep things aligned. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the tile action safe grid. Then a quick way to create another text box is to actually just click this one, duplicate it by pressing Command D on a Mac, and then double clicking it, and then you can just change the text. So I'm using all capitals just because I think all caps in motion graphics works well. I can either change the size of this welcome by changing the font size over here, like so, or I can press S and it brings up the scale options, and I can raise or lower the scale. So I like leaving my scale at 100% at the start while I, put together my composition, because basically how I create motion graphics is I put together, for example, if it's text, I put together all of my text and how it will look in the end, and then I go backwards and create all the motion. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm creating all the text to see how it looks in the end. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my welcome. So move that down. Oops. So you see that I zoomed out. To get back to that full view, you can go up to this box right here, click fit up to 100%. So I'm just going to duplicate or edit this. Welcome. Oops. Duplicate to the duplicate it one more. I can type it in and then move it. But to move it, you're going to have to click and press V on your keyboard, or go back and click selection tool. Because if you have the type tool and you try to move it, it's not going to work. So you have to go back up to the selection tool right here, or press V on your keyboard. You'll notice that they're all too big. So one thing I can do is select all three and drop down the font size until I think they will all fit. And I'm just going to slide these over, and it looks like they're actually too small, so I'm going to just play around with it. After Effects is a lot of playing around. You see, as I try to click this text, I click the background, and now I'm stuck moving the background, and I can't really click onto my text. One way to not run into that problem is to lock my background. So down here on the timeline, under this lock checkbox, you can just click the lock for this background layer. Now I can't move it, and when I use my mouse to just select the text, it's easy to select. Now I'm just going to select all three, and just on my keyboard I can press shift up or just the up arrow key to move the text one pixel at a time. So this looks pretty good, but it all looks kind of high. If I turn on my tile action safe, it's not all centered vertically. So I'm going to select all my text and then just move it down until it's about in the middle, something like that. Alright, so this is going to be my final sort of view of this text. And now we're going to actually animate it, and each one we're going to do a different type of animation. So you see here that hello kind of drops down from, and it rotates onto the screen. This is something you see a lot. Let's do that first. So the first thing we want to do is change the anchored point. You'll see on every layer, you'll see that there's this little circle with lines coming out of it. It's really hard to see, but if I zoom in, you might be able to see it better. So you can also press H or use the hand tool to move around your composition if it's zoomed in. Just a quick note. So you see this little circle with the lines coming out of it? That's called the anchor point. And that is what our text is anchored to. So when you rotate it, so if you press R, you bring up the rotation options, you could rotate your text and see how it rotates around that anchor point. Or if I press scale and increase the scale, it grows from that spot. If I move it, and you can move it by going up to this pan behind tool and moving the anchor point. So let's say we move it to the middle. Now if we increase the scale, see how it increases from the center of the text? or rotates from the center. Well, that's what the anchor point does. And so we're going to move the anchor point up to the top of this so that when we rotate it backwards, it's going to rotate from the top. So right now you'll notice that if you press R, there's only one option for rotating. But what we were doing in this composition, it's a 3D rotation. It's actually rotating backwards in space. So this cube box right here on the timeline, you can check that on, and that turns on 3D rotation, or 3D for this layer. And you'll notice that there's 3 different options for rotation. So we can rotate it along the x-axis, along the y-axis, see how it's like 3D, or again on the z-axis, which is our normal rotation. So we're going to rotate on the x-axis. And if you've never played with After Effects or heard about keyframes, this is going to be a huge lesson for you. Keyframing is basically how you create animations with After Effects or pretty much any other motion graphics tool or video editing software. So to set a keyframe, we're going to, well, first of all, we have to set our first point for our rotation. So we're going to take our X rotation and rotate it back 90 degrees or so. I would go exactly 90 degrees, so you can type that in. Then there's the stopwatch right here next to the X rotation. You're going to click that and see how there's now a yellow diamond down here on the timeline. Well, that's a keyframe, and that means that at this point on the timeline, at 0 seconds and 0 frames at this current time, the rotation is going to be 90 degrees on the X axis. If we go forward in time about half a second and we rotate it down to 0, see how it automatically creates a keyframe? Well, it'll automatically create a keyframe if there's already keyframe set for that layer. And you'll see from this point to this point, it animates because you're saying at 0 frames, I want the hello to be at a 90-degree rotation. And at half a second, at this point, we want 0 degrees. And so what happens in between? It changes, and it creates this rotation. So that's our first animation. We're actually going to just move this whole layer down just a bit because we want it to start just a few frames after the start of our composition. One other thing we can do is right-click this last free keyframe, go to Keyframe Assistant, and do Easy Ease In. And what that does is it slows down the animation as it gets to this point. So it's without Easy Ease, it's the same speed from the first keyframe to the second keyframe. With Easy Ease In on for the second keyframe, it starts out fast, or the normal speed, and then it slows into this. And it's just a little bit more natural of a motion. Alright, the last thing we're going to do is turn on motion blur. So you'll see this kind of 3 spheres layered over each other. This is the motion blur option. So click on motion blur, and you'll notice nothing happens if you just play it. And the way I'm playing it is, and rendering it out, so is I have a full keyboard with a number pad on the right side. So that is, I press 0 on the number pad to render it out. If you don't have a number pad, you can press Control 0 on your keyboard to render it out. And it's rendered out when this top bar is green. But you'll notice that motion blur is not on. We must click this Enable Motion Blur button right here on the timeline. And you'll notice that's a little bit blurrier. It's really hard to tell, but you can notice if I just put my time marker in between, see how it's a little blurry? If I turn this off, it's not blurry at all, and I turn it on, it's blurry. That's because the human eye, we try to capture motion as quick as possible, or our eyes do and our brains do, but inevitably things have blur when they move. And so this makes it a little bit more natural. So that's our first animation. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to have welcome come in and then kind of bounce into place. So we're actually going to set our first keyframe for welcome, If you press P, so we worked with rotation for hello. Now we're gonna work with position. So position, you'll see here, is the position of our text on the screen. So we can set a keyframe on position. So click that stopwatch, then go backwards, and if you go down to our hello layer and press U, you will see all the keyframes for that layer. And that will help us because we want to start this welcome animation right at the end of the hello, right before it stops. So right before it stops rotating, we're going to set another keyframe for welcome. And the way we're going to do that is we're just going to change these digits over here. So I'm just clicking and dragging to the left this first digit, which moves welcome over to the left. And see now see how it comes onto the screen like so? If I render it out, you can see how it just comes onto the screen. We're also going to we're just going to turn on 3D for all of these layers for the heck of it, and also turn on motion blur for all of them. So there you have, now welcome has motion blur added to it. But we want to add a little bit of a bounce. So this is our final spot, but before it gets there, we want it to go past this spot. So I'm just going to go back a few frames in time and then actually move this over past our end spot. So I'm just clicking it, holding shift, and dragging it to the right side. So now it kind of goes past it and bounces back, but it's still a little jarring. It's a little too fast. So I'm going to click this end one, turn easy ease in on, and then this middle one I'm going to do just click easy ease, and that slows it into that animation and slows it out of that animation. So I'm going to add a little bit more time for it to kind of go backwards into its spot by just dragging this second keyframe out a little bit more. So now, okay, we're getting a little bit of funky motion, so I'm just going to select all of these, right click them, and select keyframe interpolation. I'm just going to do linear time under spatial interpolation and see if that helps. So that helps a lot. There was some funky motion, and so if you ever get that funky motion, that might be what it is, the keyframe interpolation. So this is a little too slow now, so I'm going to move that keyframe in a little bit, and now we have welcome bouncing into our screen. So that was welcome, and that was our position change. Next we're going to do another rotation with 2. So this one will be simple. So I'm just going to, again, bring up the keyframes for the welcome layer. Now I'm going to rotate 2 onto the screen. Our anchor point is at the bottom of the 2, which is good, so we don't have to do anything. So just press R to bring up rotation and set a keyframe for X rotation. So this is our final rotation point, but this isn't where we want it in our timeline, so I'm just going to move this over a few frames, about half a second, and then I'm going to go backwards -90 degrees. Actually, we can go forward. I think I went forwards 90 degrees. Either way will work. Alright, so see how this rotates on, but see how you can see it now in the composition? It's just, there. We want to drag the end of this layer to the start of this motion, so to the first keyframe. So now you won't see it until it animates on, and that's how we want it. So now we have 2 rotating onto the screen. And we could also do an easy ease in if we want, so that slows down at the end of this motion, so that can be nice. So that's our 2 animation. Maybe I want to move it over to the left a little bit so that it starts rotating while welcome is bouncing back. So something like this. So it's more things are happening at once on the screen. And then we have a new type of animation for our the layer. See how it kind of comes out of the 2? This is another thing that we see a lot of in motion graphics. The way we do this is, there's a few ways, but I'm going to show you how to do it with a mask. So if you go up to this rectangle tool, you will see that if you click on a layer, you can create a mask around it. So if I wanted to cut off half of the word the, I can do that. but I don't want that. I want to create a mask around the whole thing. So starting from the right side and then clicking and dragging, creating this rectangle, I'm going to drag a rectangle to the end of this 2. So where the letter O ends. So now I have a mask, and I'm going to create a keyframe animation for both the mask and for the position, because we can change how the mask is with an animation. We can move the mask around, grow it, shrink it, do all sorts of things. To do that, press M and you get mask path down here. So set a keyframe, and then also for position, press P, set a keyframe. And then press U to bring up both of those keyframes. So now at this point in time, the word "the" is at this point and the mask is at this point. That's our final position. So I'm going to just move this ahead a few frames, and then I'm going to go backwards a few frames, just a couple frames. And now I'm going to actually create my motion. So I want "the" to come out of the 2. So the has to start on this side of the 2, or at least the O. But now it's funky because the mask is still on this side of the 2 as well. I want the mask to be on the other side of the 2. So click mask and then move it to the right side of the O. And now you'll see that the mask stays in the same spot, but the comes out of the O. So that's a great way to make text or pictures or anything kind of appear onto your screen. Alright, so that's the last one, or that's the second to last one, and then show is a simple scale transition. So it kind of bounces into the frame with scale. One thing we're going to do first is change the anchor point. So go up to this pan behind tool or press Y, and then move this to the center of show because we want it to grow from the center of the word, not from the bottom left corner. Press S. We're going to go to our final spot where we want to be 100%, about there, and set a keyframe. Then we're going to go backwards 2 frames or so and increase it to like 110%. And then go backwards where we want it to start to animate and go 0. So now, paying attention to the show, you'll see that it bounces in. One thing we can do is do keyframe easy ease, keyframe assistant easy ease, and then for the last one do just easy ease in, and this makes it a little bit more natural. And so there you have the basics of a motion graphics actually it's more kinetic typography, but you can use these sort of transitions and animations for any sort of After Effects project. And you could do so much with it. You'll notice that my layers are different colors. I do that just so I can separate the text from the background. So if I select all of these text layers and click the red box and then click blue, for example, now I know all these are text layers and the background is the red layer. And so if we render it out, there you have our awesome motion graphics animation. I know this ended up being a lot longer than 10 minutes. This ended up taking 23 minutes, but you know, I hope you learned a lot. There was a lot in this video. You know, you're basically learning all the basics you need to get started with any sort of motion graphic project in After Effects. These are the basic skills you need to know. You have to know how to use keyframes. You have to know how to use mask. You have to know how to, you know, do different animations with size, rotation, position, and that's basically it for After Effects. There's so many more, you know, there's lots of other special effects kind of things, but with these things you can do a lot of cool stuff. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know. Hit me up in the comments below. Otherwise, you can also check out videoschoolonline.com for more advanced tutorials and articles about After Effects and video making. And you can take my online courses as well through videoschoolonline.com. Right now I have over 19 great courses covering everything from After Effects to beer making. So check them out at videoschoolonline.com and check out some of my other videos. You'll find some great tutorials on YouTube as well. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day. Bye.